Hello, everybody. Welcome to this wonderful session of making and keeping a safe seat marginal. Just give me a few seconds for the rest of the people to join us and we'll get underway. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Good to see you all coming on the screen. A very exciting afternoon of 3 concurrent sessions. I'm very happy to let you know that the other 2 are being recorded. So sometime next week, on a sleepless night, you can go onto a webpage and have a watch. How are we going, Scott? Ready to go? Hello. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this afternoon session of making a seat marginal and keeping a seat marginal. And we've got 3 wonderful guests, and I'm just so looking forward to their insights. So we've got Nicolette Boele, Nick from Bradfield, and she's going to talk about that in a minute, but that's a North Sydney suburban seat. We've got Alex Dyson, and Alex is from Wannon in Western Victoria. So he's got some special insights because he's had 2 goes at making the seat marginal and keeping it that way. And then we've got Hanabeth is from the Northern Rivers area of New South Wales, the seat of Page, which is Lismore, Grafton, up that area. And the purpose of this session is to actually understand, for most of us who don't have a community independent member of parliament, how do we make our seat marginal if it's not already and keep it, but also how do we work when our member of parliament is not one of us, so to speak? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I think there's going to be some huge insights and lots of practical advice for us. But to get underway, I've asked each of the speakers to speak for about 7 minutes, who they are, a little bit about their electorate, and how did they go in the last election, before we open it up to strategies about making and keeping it marginal. So over to you, Nick, can I say, and lovely to see you here. So have a go. Tell us how it is.
Thanks, Cathy. So I might cover just a bit about who I am and how we went on May 21. And then, of course, Cathy, as always, I expect just cut me off if I go too far with the challenges and problems and opportunities of running the campaign again leading up to 2025, or maybe even a by-election possibly. So yes, I'm Nicolette Boele from Sydney's upper North Shore area, and the electorate of Bradfield's nestled in with Mackellar, Warringah and North Sydney. So there's the 3 electorates that did go to community independence in the 2022 election. I've got a professional background in climate policy and clean energy, accountability solutions, responsible investing and finance. So when I ran in what was until a few weeks ago a really safe Liberal seat, running on a platform of climate action, modernising the economy, integrity and respect, these things kind of came quite easy because it goes to my authentic, I suppose, professional experience and personal goals. You know, that's about putting people, not parties, into the centre of lawmaking, and it's about putting purpose, not just profits, into the centre of business decisions. So in some ways, I was a sort of a duck in water. Is that a term? And I really enjoyed the campaign because I just believe so strongly in those things that are important to the people of Bradfield. So if I wanted to I probably want to say that I've never had an ambition to be a member of parliament, and I'd say quite the contrary. I've spent a lot of my 25 years working in and out of Parliament House in Canberra with a lobby pass, working for different not-for-profits and think tanks. And I suppose when this opportunity came up with the Voices of Bradfield who are looking for a candidate, I kind of realised that things that I've been campaigning on around climate action weren't getting done, not because we weren't doing them really well in sectors like finance, but because that collective failure to deal with climate has been around for 25, 30 years, because we just have some really serious problems with our democracy. And so now, with my sort of real life experience working in the area, I have said yes to being that one particular volunteer amongst many who are giving voice to that here in Bradfield. So, you know, personally, I have to say, now I'm out the other end of the 2020 election, I'm the breadwinner in the household, so I'm having to juggle rebuilding my family life with running a campaign for 2025. But I really want to run again, and if I'm going to run again, I really want us in Bradfield to win this time. So we had quite a relatively short public campaign of only 16 weeks, so I'm quite excited to have a longer runway. But before I explain a little bit more about, I suppose, Cathy, again, what it might look like between now and 2025, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about what I thought were wins, even though I wasn't voted in as Bradfield's Member of Parliament this time. And so prior to running in Bradfield, the highest primary vote that any independent had was around 4%. And this time round, we achieved a 21% primary vote in just as I said, a 16-week campaign period. So extremely proud of that. And the electorate of Bradfield had never had to go to preferences. And this year, in the local RSL on election night, we were listening to the fact that there had been a change of government and that there were Sophie Scomps in Mackellar had been called and Kylie Tink in North Sydney. And the really, really fun and amazing thing in Bradfield is that on that night, we did not know the result of the election. That's the first time ever in the seat of Bradfield that it hasn't gone to the Liberal Party on primary votes. In fact, the sitting member had a primary vote of around 45%, so had to go through to preferences. So that to us was quite a big win. We experienced a 15.28% prime swing on primaries, which is the biggest against a Liberal, sitting Liberal in Australia. And now the margin is 4.2%. So great progress. So to us, that was a really big win. And as I was saying, actually preparing for this discussion, I think May 21 wasn't an end point for us. I don't think we lost. Quite the contrary, I think we actually made an enormous progress in what is essentially a community seeded, community nurtured and energized campaign to restore basically democracy to the people and to our Australian Parliament. And so there are many years to come, and I'm really excited to be part of that. And I have been endorsed already by the Voices of Bradfield as their preferred candidate for the 2025 election. We have very sensibly created a midpoint at the end of next calendar year, where both the Voices of Bradfield and the campaign, Nicolette, we sit down and say, does this still work? Am I the best candidate to represent the issues of the people in Bradfield? And am I, as a candidate, still with the skills and everything else needed to run and maximise the chances of having this seat turn independent? So I think that's it's made it a little bit easier to do the marathon to the next point, knowing we have a midpoint where we sit down and turn up and have a really honest conversation about whether it's still working on both sides. What else? I think
that might do.
Okay.
Just we'll come back, because I think you've just given us a really good segue, and then we'll come back and pick up about some of the other points you've made. Alex, would you just like to tell us a little bit about you and you might come off mute too, you and Wannon, and where you just give us a sense of where you're at before we just go down a few rabbit holes about this.
Certainly. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and thanks for inviting me along, Cathy. This is really such a thrill. But yeah, I'm from Wannon, Southwest Victoria. I grew up in Warrnambool, was there until I was 18, then moved to Melbourne for uni, and then ended up moving to Sydney, where I was one of the hosts on the Triple J breakfast show, youth alternative radio, for about 7 years in the end, which was really good times. But once I finished that up, I'd turned 30, and around that time, we had our 7th Prime Minister in 9 years, or there was a bit of a hot streak going on there. And I, like a lot of young people and just a lot of Australians, felt pretty disillusioned with the way democracy was functioning in the country. I could tell young people were tuning out, being on radio and talking to them every morning, people were tuning out. And we also, the person who did end up being in that position found it fit to wave some coal around in Parliament. And I Yeah, I had one of those thoughts. I think, like Nicolette, I don't necessarily want to be the person, but I did have to self assess and go, well, what am I doing to sort of help this climate change? I'm annoyed by it, I'm frustrated by it, but what am I actually doing myself? And given my background in media and that kind of thing, I thought, well, something I could do would to be run as a candidate. So I actually ran in 2019. It was a very short campaign. I think I officially got my 100 signatures into the AEC with 8 minutes to go before the cutoff. And I think people were quite surprised to see me on the ballot. There was a few issues. I launched a campaign while I was DJing in Warrnambool, my hometown, and a few of the people who signed it, I think it was about 1 a.m. and they didn't do the signatures properly. Anyway, yeah, I had such a positive experience in those 3 weeks. It was a bit of an unorthodox campaign. It was as short a run up as you can get, but even so, managed to get 10% of the vote on that run, which was extremely encouraging that people were out there looking for an alternative. And one of the alternatives that I was given, other than just being a community independent who would listen and someone who valued climate action, was my method of communication was somewhat different than most of the other candidates. The thing that probably got me the most publicity was I delivered my policies via interpretive dance. So used my body to show how serious I was about, wind farms and rail and that sort of thing. And so that was pretty cool to pop up on Insiders and, BBC World News with my campaign for that sort of thing. And it was also being one of the good things about it. The other great thing I found about being a candidate was the conversations you had with people, what I would learn about people working in mental health, people working out on, dairy farms which is a big part of Southwest Victoria as well. I found it really encouraging. Those kind of conversations were great and meant that when the next election was coming around, I'd always considered potentially running again to see what would happen if we gave it a solid crack at it rather than 3 weeks. And with the Voices of Wannon starting up on that time, and hello if anyone from the Voices of Wannon are here at the moment, but they reached out, and I guess, once you've put yourself out there, there is that expectation, or there's a certain amount of interest, and people can connect with you, gather around, and you can start planning things. And that's what happened. And there was about 50 people at the start of Voices of Wannon, and that grew over the distance. And combining with my experience running in the past, with that, it did quite well again, and we got very, very close to the end. We didn't know on the night. As the same as Nicolette, and we got it down to about a 3.8 margin, which is great because Wannon has been safe since Malcolm Fraser won the seat in about 67 years ago for the Liberal Party. And so, it's been really, really encouraging. I respect everyone who was able to get in because it is a marathon. And I thought, well, that's the end point, but there is, work to be done too. So it's, I found it very valuable, and just helping. One of the things I wanted to help out with as well is independents across Australia. I think this is such a great way to have people who are reluctant politicians, but who are very well-meaning and willing to listen to their community, willing to listen to experts. I think there's such a valuable thing. And so it's great to be here with other like-minded people to see how not only can you get in, but also keep that pressure up. Because one of the things I did find this time around, having run again and being, that going above the Labor Party as a potential challenger, more things started getting announced in Wannon in the last 3 or 4 weeks of the election.
I'll cut you off
done many times before. So
we'll come back.
Very exciting.
We'll come back and talk about the benefits. Now, before I pass over to Hanabeth, I just want to say these two guys came second, just by the tiniest margin. So not only did they get all those first preference votes, they were able to, and there's a number of other people around the country who were able to get all the preferences in, so that they actually really and truly went from safe seats to being very marginal seats, which we'll talk about in a minute. Now, Hanabeth, come on in. Tell us a little bit about Paige and how your campaign went and who you are.
Sure, thanks. Hi everyone, and thanks so much for inviting me along, Cathy. So Paige is in the northeast corner of New South Wales. Very large electorate, about 4 hours drive from one end to the other. Regional area, lots of sort of different satellite towns. Beautiful, beautiful place. Quite a poor region. Average incomes about $500 about half the electorate on less than $500 a week. So quite a rural regional context there. I think it's quite beautiful, unique region. My background before deciding to run was I'm a senior lecturer at Southern Cross University, very passionate about working with farmers and rural and regional Australians. The work that I was doing there, the research that I was always very dedicated to, was always about how do we bring science and society and industry together. That was always my passion. And I remember the very first opening lines of my honours was, how do we bring community to science and vice versa? And that always, for me, it was around climate change, particularly in climate change denial. I teach in regenerative agricultural courses, and a particular unit called Building Resilience in a Changing Climate. This was my journey into deciding to run as a politician. So first of all, it was hearing from these students who are farmers about the impacts of climate change for them. And then by the end of the unit, it was the barriers to how we can change things. So all of these great ideas and ways forward for changing things, but it came down to politics. And with COP26 then happening, and Barnaby Joyce saying, you know, cutting emissions is going to cost farmers too much. I said, well, you're not representing the farmers that I'm working with here, so I'm going to choose to stand up and run. And until that point, I was not thinking about running as a candidate, and it's not been my dream either. I absolutely love my job. I love teaching. I love research. But I decided that, okay, I'm going to put my hand up. I'm going to give this a go. And that was when I decided to reach out to the community and say, look, I'm thinking of running. I'm seriously considering running as a candidate. And there was a relatively small Voices for Page group who were actually trained up by Cathy about 7 years before that, went down to Indi and started doing some work and kitchen table talks around the region. That was Ian and Vicky and others. And they couldn't get a candidate. And so they kind of had given up, and there was still a few kitchen table talks happening around the place. And we started things up, and the community movement started there and then. And so I launched as a candidate with a small team in the end of January. And I had to cancel my first campaign launch because of COVID. I had to cancel my second, and the Omicron wave. My second launch was cancelled because it looked like Lismore might flood. It flooded. And then my third attempt was in a building that had been under 16 meters of water. So suddenly I was the context of the campaign was just completely bizarre, and very much the reason why I was running. But the 100 or 200, I think about 200 volunteers that I managed to gain in that month had all lost their homes, and their friends had lost their homes and their families. So it was just such a crazy context and time to be running. But amazingly, we still managed to bring it back. We managed to end up at the election with a few hundred volunteers, an incredible group of dedicated people that came together. And we achieved a 13% primary. And the incumbent, Kevin Hogan, he lost 4% of his primary vote, but actually overall the margin increased by 1, and that was because of a very complex playing field, 10 candidates, and so a very, we were really happy with the outcome from someone I'm not even thinking about it 6 months before, and then stepping into the ring. That was great. But I think what we've started here is we've started something here in Page. And with that network that was a small group, is now hundreds of people who want to see change. And I think that's really, really exciting. I want to support that change into the future, and those incredible people that I've already put so much time into my campaign and want to see that community politics grow. So that's sort of where we're up to now. There's some big challenges being in a rural and regional electorate like this, like trying to get the volunteers together. It's all it's just such a long way for anyone to ever go. So that is actually in itself a real challenge. Cathy, you've done that extremely well, and Indi and others do it. We've got a lot.
I'll stop you there because we'll move into that. So for those listening, can I just summarize? If you want your seat to be marginal, you've got to stand. It never happens if you just sit there and complain. So you've got to be like one of these three, but it's like the 23 others, and stand. You need, of course, you need community work, but you need someone to stand. And the winning is in the running. So I'm wanting to talk a little bit more about the now. The campaign's over and done with. We can learn a lot more about it, but I'm really wanting to get your thoughts on what we warmly call shadow representatives. What does it mean now that you're the known person, that you've had hundreds of, let's say 30,000, 20,000 people vote for you, like you're known in your community because you've put your hand up. People like you, they've got opinions, they want to back you. So what's your thinking about using that position now to advance the issues that are really important for you? Again, Nick, I'll start with you because I know you've been giving it quite some thought. So if you could describe for me what's happening in Bradfield post the election and what your feelings are about how you're going to be the shadow representative.
Thanks, Cathy. So it's quite easy to become overwhelmed when you've just suffered a little bit of burnout and you're doing your AEC and your ATO compliance and everything else, and you're cleaning up from election day. And so the team thought, we don't know who the candidate's going to be that the Liberal Party stands next time. We don't know how the independent movement's going to go and how the mainstream media portrays them. And we don't know what a good narrative is going to look like to cut through when a next election happens. We don't know if we've got a funding model that's going to work. Who wants to fund someone 3 years out from an election to help them? All these unknowns. So we said, okay, what do we have some agency over? And had a little bit of a chat with Cathy, or possibly more accurately, she had a chat with me, and it kind of unfolded. We have a 3-phase strategy, if you like, and I'll tell you just for a minute about phases 1 and 2. Phase 1 is we'd like to test a proof of concept around operating a shadow electoral office. And we want to see how that goes until maybe early next year. And the idea of that is we have this fantastic, quite affordable, high visibility middle of the electorate near a train line and parking campaign office. Tiny, great billboard type area, but we've kept it. And we are looking at soon, and hello, Team Nick volunteers, if you're listening to this and hearing it for the first time, bringing our volunteers back in to staff that office and to essentially operate as if we have already been elected. And so I know I can't walk in as a shadow representative and walk into the chamber and vote on bills, but I do know that I can do a number of other things that MPs do, such as representations, such as running their electoral office to help solve problems for people, or at least connect constituents through with the local, the state, or the federal government agencies and bodies that can provide either information or processes that help fix things. I'll give you some examples. How many people have said, we want to be part of the net zero solution here in Bradfield? How can I do that? We've even had, we're really keen to be part of getting Julian Assange home. What can I do? So it could be that we're sitting and we're hosting letter writing tutorials with people. We could be connecting people, for example, in that Julian Assange example with Andrew Wilkie, who I know is a complete champion on that campaign in the federal parliament. So we cannot necessarily, we'd be careful about what we can actually achieve with this, but we can't necessarily solve everyone's problems, but we can be in action to show that we are helping to remove barriers and connect people and give them representation. So the office is a key part of that, but probably, because you want to go to the others, Cathy, the other 2 things we're looking at, which we took to the campaign, are these BIGS, Bradfield issues groups. And that is really about having experts or people who have very strong views about issues, or who we think are quiet, but might in fact be really useful to have in this conversation around key issues. Aged care is a massive issue in our electorate. We have 20 residential care facilities, which is above the national average in electorate, which is 11. So we want to look at aged care as well. Who do we have in the electorate to bring them in? We have, the Royal Commission, you know what I mean? Well, there's opportunities to put people into action around the NDIS or other issues which have currency and have hearings in the upcoming 47th Parliament, both in the Senate, the House of Reps and committees. So this is about doing what we can. I don't know if it's going to work, but I'm kind of excited about testing the concept.
Yeah. And what it does is it, over the next period of time, just keeps you front and centre of everybody's eyes, like you're doing good stuff. And let me say, as opposed to your member of parliament who's in parliament arguing about should people wear ties, like he's not doing good stuff. So there's a lovely juxtaposition there. Okay, so I'll flick over again to you, Alex. What's actually, just a short story, what's happening in Wannon, and what's your position about, for the next period of time?
Yeah, well, that's the interesting thing, because as once the hammer falls and people get elected, like we, the Voices of Wannon community, have those debrief meetings. Okay, so what worked, what didn't, how did that all go? Just so that information is stored, that knowledge is put together, and going on to the future, that organization can maintain a good sense of power and learn from what was a really good and really successful campaign from our eyes. We're in a different position to Nicolette, probably down in Wannon, in that I'm still uncertain as to my, political future. Is it in my timeline? I'm not sure. I'd have to be asked at the time, but certainly doing whatever I can to make sure that, this community independence movement is somewhat of a hydra. And, if say one head goes off, more people can come through, and that sort of strength can go. And I know, having, catch-ups with yourself and other candidates over the distance, one of those big things is meetings throughout the next 3 years with community organizations, peak bodies, which are really good. Those kind of conversations taking place a long time before election day. There's something so strong about the authenticity and integrity that comes from those conversations. You're not in there to win a vote. There's no election coming up. There's almost, nothing in it for you, but people can know you're asking because you genuinely want to help. And I think that's an extremely powerful piece of, community goodwill, intelligence, and something that can be used, into the future that's banking. So I know that we've had discussions with that in Voices of Wannon, and it's something that's looking like it's going to be happening.
Could you just tell us, so that's, you've got a very strong Voices for Wannon, and I know Greg Twitt and others that are listening to this conversation, perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about Voices for Wannon and what its role is, and how it's going to be, what it's going to be doing over the next bit.
Yeah, well, they put together through these kitchen table conversations and getting in touch with people, a brochure, a booklet, what Wannon wants, and they were looking at the major things that kept coming up in these conversations, and that was extremely valuable. I think on top of that, getting, going to people who are somewhat politically engaged, who want to do something, adding that, I think something that will add a lot of strength to that is, rather than, bringing the political engaged, is approaching people. And instead of them, putting the word out and then coming to you at the kitchen table, you can go and talk to the people where they are, where they live, where they work, and show that you are interested and get a test from those particular areas as well. And I think combining the two will put the shadow candidates in a pretty good position when it comes to the 2025-ish election. Yeah.
So thanks. So that's a different model from Bradfield, and I can see a pincer sort of movement developing. And
flank them from both sides. That's it.
Yeah, and it doesn't put so much pressure on you as the candidate, but it does keep the issues alive. And because you've got that document, it enables things to happen. Okay, so over to you up in the Northern Rivers, Hanabeth. What's happening in Page?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of a different situation for me, Cathy. I mean, similar to Alex, I don't know for sure whether I'll run again at this stage, and I'm back to work, catching up on a lot of things that need to be done. The big issue in this region right now is the flood recovery, and I just sort of thought, well, I'm really busy, but what can I do to contribute towards that And at the moment, I'm just working to run a survey that's going to get really clear information about people's recovery from the flood. And that can be something that can be used by policymakers and different industries. So for me, that's really important. And the type of research that I do is very community engaged. So I'm working with the local recovery and resilience hubs to develop that survey, and they'll be helping to distribute that. So look, that's my focus, and that's the way that I'm helping the community right now. Having said that, what we created in the campaign is really the startings of something really incredible. So I'm going to be putting my efforts, and I've got a core team who are really keen to link up across the electorate and grow the Voices for Page movement over time. So we've got some ideas for bringing people together in this large and challenging electorate, and we'll certainly we will be keeping conversations going and looking for opportunities to expand and connect those networks. We're all still just a little bit having a break, but there is a lot of incredible work to be done in Page with the community.
I'm not going to quite let you off the hook with that answer, because as I was saying before to some people, like I have my computer on my kitchen bench, and most days when Parliament's sitting, I open the Australian aph.gov.au webpage. And if you haven't linked into that, you must. And then I go into the live streaming and I'm listening to Parliament, like such a tragic, while I'm doing my other jobs. And I had the pleasure this week of hearing Dr. Sophie Scomp's first speech last Monday. And I'm listening, minding my own business. I think I was washing up. And then she starts talking, and it almost made me cry, Hanabeth. She started talking about climate from the perspective of Page. So could you tell us a little bit about what you did there and how you were able to get Page and all the flood stuff into Parliament and into Hansard?
Thank you, Cathy. Well, yes, it's definitely worth mentioning Sophie's wonderful work. I invited Dr. Scamps up here.
So you rang her up. How did you do that?
Well, look, it actually started with the core flute business, Cathy. After the flood, it came to my attention that people were rebuilding intermittently with cardboard, and it was going moldy. And some people started asking me, can we have some of your core flutes left over from the election, because it'll make a really good intermediate material. We know it's not perfect, but can you do that? So we started to have a bit of a conversation. So I gave away all of my core flutes, don't have any left, for the hubs, and I started to connect with some of the other independents and say, look, would you be interested in donating them? And we had a bit of a conversation, and eventually they said, look, there's fire issues and there's other things, but what other ways can we help you? And I said, well, come up and see it for yourselves, and then it would be wonderful if you can represent what's happened here in Parliament. My passion here for the people of Page and for the people of Australia into the future is to ensure that climate adaptation and planning is integrated into policy into the future, and it becomes an integral part of our climate policy, because we have a situation here where
we know the because. So how did you get Sophie up there?
Oh, sorry. Yep. Okay. So she was her media and her chief of staff was liaising with my media person, and who was just taking the lead on all this stuff. And they said, right, I want to come up. She said, I want to come up. And she came up, and she came out to Lismore. I took her to the hub, and she met with a whole range of the coordinators. I took her out to a young woman whose home had been flooded, is still completely unlivable, waiting for insurance assessment. But this pod has been delivered there that is going to mean that her family can have a clean, dry place to live while they rebuild. So wow. Sophie was able to come and see it all for herself. And that was what I said. Please take this message back to Canberra. Northern Rivers needs the help of the federal government.
Wow, got it. So if you're in a marginal seat where you don't have a member of Parliament, what you can do is invite somebody else to come and visit who'll take your issues to Parliament. Now, classic example, you host them, you look after them, and that worked really well. So Nick, I'm going to pass it over to you, because you've been doing a bit of ferreting around to find out who can particularly represent you in Parliament when you've got a Liberal who's not going to represent you. So can you tell us that story?
Oh, yes. Okay. So to do this sort of shadow electoral office thing properly, obviously I need to not just go online and have a look at what websites have what information, but need to be able to connect into the formal processes of Parliament. It's great that have across the fence. We've got those Sophie Scompson and Zali Stegel and others. But I discovered this concept actually before Cathy. I can't give you credit for this one completely, but we have a duty senator, and that duty senator is a member of the government and has been given allocation of your lower house electorate to be a contact point, if you like. So there are many ways you can find out who that is. It's not easy. It's not something published. But if you do go to that magical website, aph.gov.au, you can have a look who is your set of senators in your electorate, and have a look at the ALP ones, current party holding government. You'll probably have 2, 3, 4, 5 of them, and then you can have a crack and call them all. Or you can do what I did on LinkedIn, and I searched for the first one, Jenny McAllister, and it came up, and I knew a few people who actually worked in her office. I made a few phone calls, and well, what did you know? She was my duty senator. So there's different ways of finding, but that person, now I have the phone number. I have one of their her advisors has been given the Bradfield as her contact. I now have a mobile phone number, and I'm respectfully waiting till the end of this sitting period, but then go and have a meeting in her office in the electorate in Drummoyne.
So every electorate in Australia that doesn't have a Labor Party member of Parliament, one of the state senators are allocated to look after it. So that's gold. So you need to find out who your duty senator is, and not only your duty senator, but know in each state, your Labor Party senators, their job is to represent the whole state. So you can access any single one of them at any time about anything. But if you, as the, what do we call ourselves, the shadow representative, set up a special relationship with your Labor Party, because they're the government, senators, and if they know that you're the go-to person, I mean, they'll also go to the Labor Party, but if you're the go-to person, then that makes things much easier. So did you have for instance, Nick, about how you might use your duty senator? Was there a particular issue you were going to advocate on?
There's a few, but we have a very strong interest amongst the 610 volunteers. Of half of those are still very sticky around what they can do to advocate for Voice to Parliament, or a Statement of the Heart. So we were, and with the Voices of Bradfield, patiently, because they've just re-elected their executive a few weekends ago and working together. But my great strategy, my idea would be that we'd work together with Voices of Bradfield to maybe invite Pat Dodson or Linda Burney or someone to come and talk with the people of Bradfield. I mean, I'm happy to invite Paul Fletcher too if he wants to come, but cut through the fact that this is politics. This is about engaging and informing the people of Bradfield about what the Uluru Statement of the Heart means, what's been proposed by the government, and to give them the opportunity to ask people directly questions and hear from them, such as those two great senators. Well, no, hang on. Linda Burney's a senator, isn't she? Yes.
No, Linda Burney's House of Reps.
House of Reps. Okay, sorry. Yep. Yeah, here in Bradfield. So that's an example. I think my sitting Liberal MP probably wouldn't have the same level of access to that. I'm not sure if I will be able to, but being a little bit, growing up with an older brother, you have to let it drop your shoulder a little bit to get places. But yeah, give that a crack and see if it works.
So I just want to say to all the people listening, so there's a bit of a competition happening at the moment. We talked about it this morning. Helen Haynes wants Indi to have the strongest yes vote in the country. And then Zali's taken it up, and Zali said, no, it's going to be Warringah. There's absolutely no reason why actually Bradfield couldn't have the strongest yes vote in the country. And there's absolutely no reason why anybody listening today can't ring up their Labor Party senator and say, would you come to my electorate? I'll organise an event, and would you come to speak to us about the Voice to Parliament? Like, that's the job of the senators. And any of you can do it. You don't actually have to be a candidate to do it. Anybody can ring your senator to do it. So I encourage you to do it. And just before I pass on to the other two panels, there's a question there from Finn from down in Casey. No, you don't actually have to be the shadow representative to do any of this, but just if you are the shadow representative, like we've just made that name up, like it didn't exist before. It didn't exist before Nick called herself it. Like it's a whole brand new concept. So that's why she's called herself that. The fact that she came second really gives some legitimacy to her. But you can just call yourself, a voice for Casey representative, and that gives you as much power as you want, or a voice for, you make up the title, but you've already got the group. So yeah, anybody can do this. But I think the point Nick's making is you just need to put your shoulder down and be a bit assertive and use your senators for your purposes in your electorate, because they give you access. So you're not defined by your House of representation. Okay, so let's just get some comments from Alex and Hanabeth on what is it? Are there other things happening in your electorate you want to just share with us before we move on?
Well, I guess just as I was coming towards the end of my spiel at the start, talking about the kinds of momentum you can get through that pressure, and whether that's pressure in the the final weeks of the election, or that's pressure now because you can go to the local media, you can do that, saying whether you're a member for member of the Voices for Casey, or whether you are a shadow representative, or you're just a person who's concerned. That sort of pressure, when there is you do see the actual representatives, at least I saw it in Wannon, starting to make more announcements for that, and hopefully being better representatives as a result. And so, yeah, I'd probably echo those sentiments that having that, whether it's the side office, or if you don't have the funds or the candidate for that, yeah, local media, those Facebook groups, those kind of things, those conversations can be really powerful. And hopefully, whilst you could go through the duty senator, also that'll keep the current representative working hard for your community as well. And you get some action done the roundabout way.
So just before we get off, what you're just talking about during the election, as the Liberal Party actually understood that you were really gaining traction, like obviously a marginal seat now, what were some of the things that you saw happening?
Well, I put out a video on a Wednesday saying it was quite curious that the Warrnambool Surf Club had been campaigning for money, and the member at the moment, he's just started his 5th term, Dan Tian, was going around trying to find signatures for a petition to get the Warrnambool Surf Club money, and I found that quite intriguing, as he was the member in the government, and I didn't know why you would need a give a petition to yourself in order to get some funds. Where next door in the marginal seat of Corangamite, Anglesey Surf Club, Torquay Surf Club, Jan Juck Surf Club had all received funds. And I did a little bit of my investigative journalism, and I was calling them up going, did you need a petition? That kind of thing. I did that, put a video out, and yeah, within 24 hours, I think it was somewhat coincidental, but money was announced, pledged for the surf club should the government be re-elected. And so after 50 years of nothing, that kind of thing, it feels like a win. There's never going to be, when you're putting this pressure on, you're never going to get a direct pat on the back saying that was all you. And it probably wasn't all to an extent, but it is one of the great things about, putting pressure on and running these sort of shadow campaigns, is you can just feel good within yourself that these are things are getting done. And that's what I love about everyone who gets involved in these sort of independent things. It's not about winning and sitting in the throne. It's about the local communities getting the funds they need to run, successful programs, whether they are those sort of sporting ones, or the important mental health, homelessness services, and aged care, and those kind of things as well. And so it's always a great moment to do it. And it's one of the great things that being a shadow representative can come with as well. You don't have that pressure of, making decisions, but you can apply the pressure on behalf of your communities to the people in power.
In fact, Alex, I think being a marginal seat, if there's no one putting pressure on the federal member, you lose the advantage or the leverage of being a marginal seat. So once you've got the close result, you actually need somebody, whether it's the Voices for group or someone like yourself, to actually saying, hey, look at us and pay attention to us. But if no one does it, it doesn't happen. And if you don't do it, then your federal member gets away with being pathetic. and pathetic and not doing anything. So so the winning is exactly what Alex is just talking about, is having a group and then a spokesperson who can actually call your federal member to account. And Hanabeth, I just want to just talk to you a little bit about your thoughts, because you're so passionate about climate. What were your thoughts about last week when your Federal National Party Member of Parliament voted against that climate change bill? What were your thoughts about that?
Not really surprised, but clearly disappointed. One of the things that really struck me when I started to really step into the arena as a candidate was like, it really is true that 2/3 of our representation in Australia is from city seats. So as a result, I just really wanted to ensure that the voices of rural and regional Australia are strong in the new parliament, and particularly in relation to the new climate bills that are coming through. And I thought it was, it's absolutely, Helen Haynes does incredible work in ensuring that that voice is heard, and for Indi and others across Australia. The National Party came from the Country Party, was supposed to be that voice for rural and regional Australia. So it was such a clear statement to me that they really have lost that connectivity, when it's more important to that National Party to support the fossil fuel lobby and this dying industry that is not the future, in favour of saying we don't want to look after rural and regional Australia. It's
So that's how you felt. What did you do?
Oh, not a whole lot, Cathy. I just tweeted a little bit here and there.
Yeah.
I just made a few comments, and that's all I can do at this stage. And look, and I didn't specifically mention our local member. I just said, look, it's a real disappointment that.
But you put out a press release, did you? Or did you do Twitter or social media, or you did something? Social
media. I didn't put out a press release. Look, I just said I was disappointed in the Nationals, and I actually commended Ridge.
So let's get, I'm going to stop you. It wasn't no just attached to it. So what you did as the shadow representative is you did some social media to let the local member of parliament know how incredibly disappointed you were in what he did. Is that what you did?
Subtly, Cathy, perhaps.
Subtly, yeah.
Yeah, look, it is. It's so important that the regions have a voice and have a strong voice in Canberra, and there's very strong feeling in Page right now that people are feeling that they have no voice. Those who've been subjected to these catastrophic floods, like nothing I've ever seen, are feeling that they're on a very, very, very slow road to recovery, if on the road at all, and they're feeling that the voices are not being heard. So that for me is really important, and that's why I'm doing that work with the survey, and just to make sure that we can bring those voices together in a really good systematic way that can inform how we do move forwards to give these people a voice. And that's always been the work that I do, so that's just continuing.
Yeah. What I suppose I'm trying to really pick out from what you said, and I'll be with you in a second, is that you didn't sit back and do nothing. You actually used your voice and your representation in your community to let the member of parliament know that he hadn't done the right thing by a lot of people. And I suppose I'm just labouring the point to all the candidates who ran, that when your member of parliament votes in a way that's out of sync with what you know that you heard during the electorate, doing something about it is really important. But I'll pass over to you, Nick. You've got a better way of talking about this.
No, not at all. I was just going to offer, it just reminded me, when I used to work at Amnesty International Australia, we did not campaign on issues inside Australia against the Australian government, but we would do in the region. And so similarly, just Paul Fletcher, our local member in Bradfield, also obviously voted down the climate bill, being a Liberal and not being Bridget Archer, and didn't cross the floor. So we can actually also support each other as the shadows by commenting on each other's sitting members from outside the electorate on social media when and where it is relevant for issues that are common to our platform. So that's what I was going to suggest, is something that we can do. It could certainly happen. I had a number of people on Twitter calling out Paul Fletcher for his role and his position and his tone around representation and what have you, and basically saying, gosh, who knew that he was going to vote against the climate bills, because have a look what happened in Bradfield. It's a marginal seat. And that was great because, you know, some of these people that commented had 5-6 times more followers on Twitter than I have at the moment. So we can help each other in those ways.
That's a great point, because I suppose that's what I heard Sophie Scomp's doing, speaking on behalf of Lismore in Parliament. And that's the power of like the third party rather than the actual, and it's what you talk about, where you've got to be subtle about it because you've got to live in the community. So sometimes it's other people can do it. So I suppose that's part of this convention, is actually finding a body of people. So maybe next time it might be the Wannon people who speak out and say, look, speaking on behalf of the people in the Northern Rivers, what's their member of parliament doing? And, you know, copying him into the Twitter handle, because I think that cross-fertilization across the nation, you know, and Casey can be doing it. We can be doing it with each other, and then building up this sense of, I don't know, critical mass is really behind some of these issues. Alex, can I just ask you a bit of a question before I open it up a little bit more? Is this is your second, you ran the second time. Is it a difference between the first and the second time?
There is a difference. Like it's amazing how awareness just can really just drive a campaign, and how one of my, you know, difficulties this time around was raising that awareness. You know, I'm in the fortunate position of, you know, having worked at Triple J for a while. So I was able to get a little bit of a profile around a certain, you know, subsections of the community. But if I'm out talking to farmers, sheep farmers outside of Ararat, still no, they've got no idea who I am. And therefore it's very difficult to just trust someone coming in and doing that. And so the second time around, I found locking in that awareness and getting out to as many people as possible, you really do get a little bit of momentum. Someone's met you before, whether someone saw you at an RSL, that word of mouth starts spreading. And that is the benefit of going around, because I felt it a little bit from running the first time. We'd go, oh, you ran the first time, you're serious about this. You know, there's a little bit of awareness there, friends told. Running the second time. And the good thing about each run is I think then awareness is locked in. And if I were to run again, there'd still be people who wouldn't have a clue who Alex Dyson is or what he's about or that kind of thing. But yeah, people will have remembered from the time before, and hopefully their faith in who I am, who Voices of Wannon are, who the Community Independent Movement are, will be locked in, and you'll be able to build on those kind of things. And so awareness has been quite massive, and also scheduling and meetings I've got a lot better at, as you know, having my research ready, and that kind of stuff.
So there's two things you said there. One is the exponential growth. So you got 10% in the 2019, you got 20+% this time, and then you got all the preferences. So that's an exponential growth. So for example, the next time, like it's only that much more you need, sort of thing.
It's so funny because that first 10% is the easiest to get. I find that's the easiest you can win. People are like, they're all rubbish, I may as well vote for you. That second 10%, I got double the percentage, but I put in 50 times the work to get that double. So it does get harder, the last little percentages that you do need to get over the line. And we're, you know, 3.8% away. It'll be probably 10%, 10 times more work again to try and get that final 5% potentially that may need to tip you over the edge. But yeah, I do find it certainly helps running again, you know, and particularly at the sort of attacks that a number of the community independents got. Like I was fortunate enough to get $60,000 from Climate 200, which, you know, some aggravated some people for whatever reason. However, you know, being able to say, well, I ran before, you know, completely separate to that. It has nothing to do with my campaign. And so, yeah, multiple runs does show how serious you are. And I think Nicolette will be able to absolutely, be able to get a lot of momentum based on the fact that she's run before as well.
And you also made the point that you learned a lot. So the second campaign, like when you first start out, you so much a rabbit in the headlights because it's all new. You're never that naive again, I have to say.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And you don't take offense nearly so much because you can use it. Oh, that's all, you know, maybe you don't even read your own social media, let somebody else do it. So you're actually able to be, and I'll just use the example there. In Victoria, there's a state member of parliament up in the Mallee, Ali Cupper, and she ran 3 times. So a very traditionally conservative seat, took a long time for her to get, but the third one was what did it. She got, the first one 10%, then to 20%, and then everyone said, that's what we want. So, and so sometimes it does take the 3 to do it, I have to say, a lot of work. And that's why I think you absolutely need what I would be saying is your support of your community behind you in whatever way, shape, or forms, that it's a Voices for group or what you're doing now, like Hanabeth is building the community base. Hanabeth, what did you want to say?
Like, I was just going to ask, one thing that I noticed from looking at the incredible successful independents that we have now on the crossbench is that they had really a huge number of community volunteers. Like, Ryan, and I know that they started their campaigns with about 800 volunteers, many of them. So I'm really interested to hear, I mean, Alex and Nicolette, how many volunteers you started with and how you managed to increase that over the campaign. How many did you end up with at the end?
Nick.
Okay. Well, I came into the Voices of Bradfield process around 10 months in. So there were a number of members, I think there was 52 members, there was executive and maybe all up just over 100 volunteers on that base. By the time we finished sort of 6 months later, 4 months into a public campaign, we had 610. But I want to say that that last 300, I think, came on in the last 2 weeks. So staggeringly, and I'd have to say, I think that's a real point of difference to the incumbent, is that they would turn up with their 6 paid Liberal Party people, just like we had fun. Yes, the t-shirts were daggy, but we turned up with hope and optimism and solutions, and they turned up with fear and grudginess, and like it was such a different tone. So yes, it's not just all numbers. Numbers absolutely matter, because that's the door knockers, the people doing the pre-polling. It gives some rest and respite for people that can't make it or get sick or whatever. But just the tone of the campaign is is an asset as well.
Yeah,
that's a really good point. We had about 300, I think, Hanabeth. We managed to get most of there was about 92 booths in Wannon, and we had them almost all of them covered for the full day. So that was pretty good for an electorate which is bigger than Belgium, I think we found. And so yeah, it is very important. But the cool thing is, as well, is like people at the end of it, you'd get people the day after going, oh, well done, I wish I'd done more. And so you got volunteers coming in, even, not in the last 2 weeks, but after the 2 weeks after the election. And so having a way to harness them and something to funnel them towards, so you can pick it back up, whether you're starting, the day after the election, or you're starting at the midpoint between the two or later. It's a really good time to start picking them up as well.
It's such a great, Alex, and and Nick too. Thank you. I really noticed that huge influx once the election was called, and I think people were particularly distracted in Page with the flood, and they just went, "What? Here we go. We've got someone to get behind. Okay, here we are." And that's when over 200 people just popped up out of nowhere, which was wonderful. But yeah, and the calls on the contacts afterwards and the emails just of support saying, never met you. So, and people just coming up to you in the street going, thank you for running. It was just such a wonderful thing, and very encouraging, and just people who want to be a part of that, people who really want to help support community candidates into the future.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to join this session to a close. Can I say thank you? I've just loved it. And what I love more than anything else is your optimism in the face of not being the obvious winner, like getting the seat, as you're saying, the grand throne. I actually think that it's what you're saying a bit, Alex, is the power is actually now what I would call holding the fire to the feet of your member of parliament on the opportunities, like not on everything. And then the opportunity for in the next 3 years to be better, not actually attacking your member of parliament because they're useless, but actually showing that you're better, like what you're talking about, Hanabeth, by doing the petition, by bringing people in. What you're talking about, Nick, is actually keeping the office going and being a viable alternative. And who knows what happens in Wannon as the Voices for group just continues to build, because they're not going to let go. And
I
Alex
see them in the
not-
chat. They're not letting go. They're going hell for
Yeah.
leather.
And if it's
Yeah,
not Alex, it'll be
decades
somebody
ahead
else.
of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I hope for the people, everyone listening, it just gives you confidence that there's so many ways of winning and being effective and delivering for your community. And just sitting back and saying, oh, not for us, is just not the answer. Nothing happens if you don't get involved. So I just want to say good luck to you three and good, really best wishes to all the other independents who are going to continue to play a role in their seats that are held by other groups. But I just would ask everyone to figuratively join your hands together and say thank you, not only for your time and your energy, but for the work you're going to do for all of us. So thank you.
Thank you, Cathy, putting up on this amazing weekend and for
Yeah.
inspiring us always. It's really wonderful.
Well, if you want to
Thank
hang
you.
around, the next session is on the Senate in a few minutes. So for those who are going to be here for that. And then tomorrow, we've got those who did actually get to Parliament talking about what it means to be community independence, not just independence. Anyhow, I'll love you guys and leave you. And thank you very, very much for all your energy.
Thanks, Cathy.
See you, team. Bye.
Volunteer